let's start again. Now we have only 35-40 minutes, it's fine. Time is also a matter of, cognition, that sometimes you see that time moves fast, sometimes it doesn't move at all. If you wake up early, say 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, it's fine. But people like me who don't wake up early morning, so we put a lot of alarms, say 7:10, 7:15, 7:20, 7:25. But if you don't put the alarm clock and you make the distance, sometimes it so happens that you wake up at 6 o'clock and you think, okay, let's sleep for 5 more minutes. You sleep and you wake up at 11 o'clock. Possible. So time, again, but it's a sleeping thing, it's a fun part. But it's also very interesting to see that, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. If you're sleeping and you're dreaming, and many times we wake up when someone is knocking at the door. So, and you wake up. And you realize that in your dream also, somebody was knocking at the door or something of the same effect was happening. It's not suddenly that what I mean to say is that your dream also adjusts to the outer stimuli and creates a narrative, creates a picture in your dream itself, a story which matches the object which is stopping your brain and dream. So, but anyways, we are talking about two different kinds of processes. One is called top-down processing and the other one is called bottom-up processing. Bottom-up processing would be called a very passive kind of information processing, in which, so if you have done computer science, you will know that just the data entry does not produce the model. In computer science, you need to have some kind of model to make sense of the data. A pattern has to be recognized or pattern has to be projected to make sense of the data, which is raw. So raw information it comes, but you need your top-down, conceptual, contextual, and sometimes social and cultural information. There is a very interesting story that it's a story about in Africa or South America, some tribe where they actually took, audio recorder, tape recorder. And the chief of that tribe was asked to record his voice. And he recorded his voice. So this man who took this tape recorder, he played it back. And this chief was angry and he was actually afraid that he have taken my voice. So it's taken my voice is a very interesting concept. Many studies, previous studies also show that if you show someone first time his own picture, the people will not recognize. Because seeing picture is also very, learned thing. You need to learn how to see a 2D image and organize things. So it's very complicated, and only during the period of time, your life, when you start, your social background, your culture, your language, many things play a role in perceiving the object. So all of you have seen the old and young lady in this. Nobody has failed so far. Okay. So these terms are important, top-down and bottom-up processing. And top-down and bottom-up processing not only in vision, it happens in all senses. It happens in your, auditory information, auditory sense, it happens at your all levels of senses. Because data is coming, that is the bottom-up, and then you have to organize it, and that is top-down. But in all this case, we also have something called selective attention. And that is a mechanism for perception, because you cannot see or process all the information which is coming in. It's too much of information. And this much of information processing is unnecessary. So what actually brain does, it's a good analogy that it has a spotlight. And that first example of our picture that we saw, in which later questions were asked, that shows that selective attention plays an important role. So it's again that once you see the object, you see it, you don't see the details, but only when you need information, specific information, then you put spotlight. And then you try to take information out of the information, that data. And it is called selective attention. Anyone remembers the example that we have seen of selective attention? The gorilla experiment was actually based on that. And they said that inattentive blindness, that if you are not attending to something, you are not seeing it. Musician or a girl's face? Musician? Yeah, both. Again, that you see that it's a matter of, it looks like that you are changing your attention. When you want to see a girl's face, you have to put in your attention. When you want to see this musician, so it's when the spotlight keeps changing, your perception changes. This is little more complicated but interesting. I will not discuss about the experiments in this because they are psychology experiments, a lot of them. But Treisman is very famous in psychology. She proposed a theory called feature integration theory. The crux of the theory basically is that you get features from data. Color, shape, edges, a lot of information in terms of vision. And then, so color, orientation, motion, curvature, depth. And then you try to organize them, and the organization happens through your attentional spotlight and top down thing. So it's, the perception lies in between somewhere. It's not always the top down, not always the bottom up, but it's the mixture of thing that you combine together. So it's called feature integration theory. If you change your attention, your it's okay. Why do we dream? That also stems from this top-down, bottom-up thing, that your bottom-up is collecting a lot of information. But all of that is not going to be used for perceiving the object. Some things you trim, you don't need them, or sometimes you don't. If you are walking on road, you see a lot of faces, but you don't remember them. But they are hanging somewhere in your system because the data has already come in. So what your brain, one theory says that what your brain does when you are sleeping is that it organizes things. Data which is not required is thrown away, data which is important, which is like it's categorized. So all of that is happening because your brain is trying to organize, and that produces some kind of dream, one of the theories. But it's interesting theory that where this data goes. So for perception, I'll just talk more about last theory, which is interesting again, is that a classical version of perception and action is this. You have an object in the world, you perceive it. Now perception requires a lot of data, senses and processing. Then you cognize it, and this cognition includes memory, naming, how to use this particular object, and lots of other stuff. and then finally you act on it, right? That's the classical way of perception action. But for last few years, people have been like discarding this whole idea. What they are saying is that it's not linear, it's more of circular, or it's a cycle. The point is that the action has an effect on perception itself. It's not that you perceive the object, cognize it, and then you act. It's a cycle which keeps on running at the back of your head. Now there are brain studies, there are, what you call single cell studies also. People have found out that action perception happens together. And what we saw last time in one of the videos related to language is that when you see the object, your motor areas also get activated. So one of the theories suggests is that when you look at the object also, it's called affordance theory, the theory of affordance, AFFORDANCE. So affordance means that when I see the object, it produces set of actions that I can take with this object. If I do not find an action associated with this object, I may not be able to perceive it properly. So action and perception, so object, its perception, and related actions that I can take works together. So these days in artificial intelligence, a lot of people actually talk about affordance theory, where the object in computer science or in artificial intelligence, perception is a big problem, because how do you make computers see an object? And that seeing has to be associated with some kind of action also. So now in artificial intelligence, they have models where action is included. So the robot moves a little further and then recalibrates its perception, changes. So the model allows the robot or artificial agent to reorganize its world based on the action that it has taken. So perception again is not devoid of action. It's not passive. It's very active, and brain does all of this. There is another term which people use in perception, is called global versus local processing, and a lot of designers deal with it. You know what global and local processing is. When you are processing it as P, it's local processing. But when you see the gestalt of it, or gestalt is also called the whole or bigger picture, you see a. So that's the global processing. There are brain mechanisms which goes into details. It's like zooming in and then zooming out. So when you zoom out, you see the bigger picture, that is the global processing. You zoom in, you get the local. Okay, so perception basically is a lot of other things, and I will upload some more material related to perception. But perception is a very complicated thing. Sometimes it was even considered that cognition is equal to perception, and cognition requires concepts, memory, and lots of other stuff. But we have discussed perception only as a processing of data and how it is organized. But this organization, whereas this top-down thing comes in, you need to have a lot of other data in your head, in your brain. That is language and concepts and categorization and schemas and other stuff. Okay, so let's talk about memory also a little bit. If we finish it today, we'll finish it. Otherwise, we'll continue next time. It's fine. Any questions so far in perception? No questions? Good. No questions, again I say that mean only two things. Either is that I'm too good to explain, that you don't have any questions. The other question is that don't mind. Who wants to ask a question? Okay, so memory. We all have memories. Anyone who does not have a memory, actually sometimes all of us face this problem of memory, that we forget, we do not remember, and sometimes we do not even encode the memory. But there are two basic theories of memory actually, in general. One is called bookkeeping theory. Now bookkeeping theory is primarily says that the data that comes in, you somehow process it and put it somewhere in the drawer kind of stuff. A particular part of your brain is assigned to that data and it's kept there. Next time when you want to retrieve or recall that particular object, it's somehow that you know the location of that part of the brain, you go there, retrieve it, and then just recall it. Now this particular theory is very much influenced by computer science storage management. The computer science actually has this idea that you have files, folders and everything, and you know where the location of the information. But brain actually sometimes does not work like that. It's a very different kind of mechanism. Another theory is, I don't remember the name of that theory right now. I'm sorry, I'll tell you the name of the theory. But the point basically is that you do not remember the objects, but what you remember is the connection, the relation between objects, and you construct the memory. So it's called constructive theory of memory. So construct the theory memory based on your present data, but what you remember is only the connections. And now other theories have also come up that it's not the brain part which is important, it's the synaptic connections that you have. More connections fire together, wire together. That's the dictum. That if two neurons fire together, they wire together, they remain. So more you keep firing them, you have a better memory. Okay. There is one kind of theory which is called flash bulb memory. You remember this picture? But I don't, we have also similar kind of relation with this particular incident. But you can also think of one such incident in your life which is very live. You can still remember it so vividly that you know that as if this happened just yesterday. So it's called flash bulb memory. How it happens, we don't know, because it's not keep repeating. In general, in psychology, people talk about stages of memory. You have encoding, data coming in, and then so it's a perception, data coming in, your top-down processing works, and then you organize it, and then it has to be encoded in some form. What form, we do not know. But right now we can say that it's the synaptic connections. But okay, in some format it has to be encoded. In computers, how is it encoded? In bits, 0, 1, 0, 1. If you see that in brain also you have, firing, not firing, neurons firing, not firing. So you can say that it's 0, 1, 0, 1, but it's not a very good analogy. But let's say that it has to be encoded in some format. If you cut open somebody's brain and want to see that, okay, where is my picture in his brain? Where does he remember me? You can't do it because you don't have pictures of people, you don't have alphabets remembered in the head. There's some mechanism. It has to be encoded. It has to be stored somewhere for long run. And then you also need a mechanism of retrieval. Otherwise, it's for a thing like keyboard is one of the ways of putting data, disk and monitor. So there is a very famous model of Atkinson and Shiffrin, three-stage model of memory. It talks about sensory memory, short-term memory and long-term memory. And the very simple mechanism is that you have external events happening, which is the perception. Then you have, which sensory input comes in, you remember it at sensory level. Now sensory level means you remember, your auditory system remembers it for some time, your visual system remembers it for some time, your touch remembers it for some time, your smell, your taste also remembers it for some time. And then unconscious processing, you take some information out, some information necessary, that's where your attention comes into play, and then this goes to short-term memory, it's encoded for a longer term. Now people have studied a lot short-term memory, which is also now called working memory. Anyone who does work on teaching, learning, they talk a lot about working memory. How much, and in computer science, this would be called, working memory would be called RAM, random access memory, and then that will be called ROM, longer period. So short-term memory is very important, and there are a lot of people who are working on short-term and working memory, how it actually works. So let's see the details of the sensory and short-term memory and long-term memory also. But this problem, this model is also not perfect anyways, but it works. Some information skips the first two stages and enters long-term memory automatically. Many times this happens. Since we cannot focus all the sensory information in the environment, we select information through attention. That is important to us. The nature of short-term memory is more complex. So, if you think in common sense, how do we perceive information coming? We are doing something, putting it in our brain as a memory, and whenever we require, we take it out. This is one of the theories which goes with the bookkeeping style of theory. Okay, so we are more interested in short-term memory, which is also called working memory, because that is a place, you can imagine it as a workplace. Anyone who works in journalism or newspaper or television news, you will see that there is a place where all the news comes in, and then you have to, what is it called? When a table where lots of people are sitting, what do you call, executive editors, and they have to decide which information should go on air. All that is coming in is not broadcasted, and that's where the some data has to be removed, some data has to be revised, some data has to be, a lot of things are happening. So working memory is that. So data comes from sensory, you process it and then send it to long-term memory. But it also sends information to your motor action, because you have to act also. Now we also know that working memory plays an important role in your perception itself, because the data comes, it's like, say, some gibberish information has come, or encoded message, or some kind of encrypted message has come, and you try to decode it, and that's where top-down processing happens, and then you make sense of the data. So perception also gets involved in this working memory, or working memory gets involved in perception. But we have two different kinds of auditory and visual information, which is important, because most of our information comes through auditory and visual, and they call it auditory rehearsal, or they call it, what do you call, buffer, and the other one is called Visual Spatial Sketchpad. We'll try to get into it. So, step-wise step, how actually we put memory, or how do we create memory? Some information like route to your school is automatically processed. So it's like, even including when you are moving around, you do not, consciously recollecting. You know the route, you know the way, you just move around. So they are automatic. Riding bicycle is also one of them. Writing your stuff is also one of them. So some things are automatically processed. You don't have to remember them. Imagine speaking. I have to produce coherent and meaningful sentences, tons of sentences. And I'm not thinking about it. Oh, A, and the next letter should be D or B. It automatically is coming out. But where is it coming out from? From my memory only. So a lot of other things are happening at the back of my mind, which is automatic. But memory, and it is one part which is automatically processed or unconsciously processed. Not unconsciously, sorry. Subconsciously processed. However, some kind of information needs attention. I will be very happy to see if people remember their own number, phone number. All of you remember your own phone number? Yes? Yeah, because phone numbers, you don't need to remember your phone number. You just give a missed call or something. There are other mechanisms of giving your phone numbers. Okay, so I know now that in Italy, people remember their phone numbers. Okay, anyone? What is your phone number? No, just say. I still have problem in understanding the letters in Italian. Anyone in English? Can you say the number in English? I'm not going to call you, don't worry. Remember just your number.
346-3080-985.
Okay, that's fine. 346
346-3080-985.
Okay, that's good. Fine. I'll remember this method of saying 346 and then rest. Fine, thank you. But I'm surprised that you remember your number. Any other number you remember? Okay, so any number, just say what is the number?
340-7743-261.
Okay, fine. Third number? Any other number you remember? Okay, so sorry, it's fine.
Like home telephone numbers, other, yeah. Like like mobile telephone number, but lot of home numbers.
Okay,
like
lot of home numbers you still remember. But I emphasize that you still remember, because these days you have unlimited phone book. You don't have to remember it. But if still you are remembering, it's a good thing for me to know. Because I come from this place called Korea also, and it's difficult that people don't remember their own number. I too do not remember my number. It's an unnecessary load to remember the number, and 10 digits. But I will come to the point of your number remembering, because it's 10 digits that you have to remember, and in a sequence. And that's where the next part will go in. So I'll come back to it. Okay, I failed. I thought that people don't remember. Okay, I'll come to your point first, because then it will make sense to continue. I'll continue next time. Okay. One of the methods of remembering in working memory is called chunking and hierarchy. The reason for this is that, I'll just tell you, that there is a limit to the bits or information that you can remember, and it's called magic number 7 plus minus 2. So you can remember things only 7 objects, 7 things plus minus 2, but your number is 10 digits. So how you remember is that you chunk them. Now chunking is, say in this case, 1776, one chunk. 1492, another chunk. So you have, it's like 16 digit is usually debit or credit card number. How you remember it? You chunk them 4 into 4. And that is the limit of your, working memory or short-term memory. It's called magic number 7 plus minus 2. There was this later study which said that it's not 7, it's 5 plus minus 2. But anyways, the point is that you cannot remember more than 9 digits, or in any case, it's difficult until and unless you chunk them in some case, and chunking can go unlimited. Because you can again chunk this as one group and remember. So, but again, when you do that, you get into the hierarchy. You will have to. There is a time also for this. So there is a data limit. Data limit is maximum 9. You cannot remember more than 9. Time limit is also there, and that time limit is around 20 minutes. So your working memory or short-term memory, you can keep the information for 20 minutes unless you rehearse it, do some action to it, or some mechanism is employed that takes it into long-term memory. So either you have to associate it with some episode, you have to associate it with some kind of emotion. You need to have some mechanism to pass it on to long-term memory. But since next time I'll start with one by one step, so we just skipped it. But working memory has a limit of time and data. Data is 7 plus minus 2, and time is 20 minutes. So for 20 minutes you can keep the information. We used to do this in our school times. We used to call it Vibgyor, to remember the colors of rainbow. So it's in order: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. You can chunk it, just take the first letter and remember it. You can't remember all of this together. It goes up to 7, but it's difficult. Anyways, it's time, 1 o'clock. So next class will continue with this, and we'll go to one more point. That's where language and concepts come in.